The theme for our talk this evening is meditation and living. I rather like the phrasing of the topic, which I came to know last evening on arrival here, because all these ages meditation has been considered as something that is a part of religious life or spiritual or mystic life, but very little to do with life as we live. Meditation is looked upon as an exercise of quietude, quiescence, withdrawal from life, and not something that can help an active, dynamic life. It is a measure of our progress in appreciating the true values that today we are talking of meditation and life, living. It is another testimony to the fact that spirituality today is not something to do with hermitages, retreats, monasteries, but something that is integral, essential for a wholesome living. Modern spirituality is embracing more and more of the segments of life. It is also inviting science, physical science, to test its own perceptions from the scientific standpoint. And meditation is a contribution of spiritual life to the progression and perfection of our daily life. For meditation really means an attunement to something that is desirable, that we do not have, attunement to peace, attunement to calm, attunement to a higher consciousness or a deeper consciousness to which this peace, serenity, joy, happiness is natural. In our lives today there is so much of stress, so much of tension, anxieties, that we have been obliged to find out ways and means to relieve the stress of these tensions, and meditation is a capital means to achieve this objective and to enhance the value of life that we are leading. Meditation, as I said, is at one moment tuning of our mind, our consciousness to a deeper or a higher consciousness which elevates us, purifies us, calms the waters of our being. But this kind of meditation cannot be done all of a sudden, keeping the tempo of life as it is. It needs a special background. It needs a proper climate in which alone it can be fruitfully practiced. Patanjali, one of the master systematizers of yoga in India, writing more than 3,000 years ago, he speaks of certain essential requirements, preliminary conditions which have to be fulfilled before one is fit to enter the portals of meditation. And the first of these requirements that we have to practice, build in our life, is non-injury. Of course, that it is not physical non-injury that he means is evident. Seekers, spiritual seekers, don't need to be told, don't harm others. But it is the psychological non-violence, non-injury that is required. The thoughts that we think, the feelings that we feel, that we entertain, the impulses and the emotions, they are to be purified, and we have to eliminate any kind of violence from our psychological system. Ill will, hatred, jealousy, pressurizing others, these are all subtle forms of violence which in the cosmic balance create more havoc than physical harm. And they burn us more than the victims. They create certain grooves in which our movements flow and confirm themselves. We have to establish a state of consciousness which is entirely free from feelings, thoughts of violence. And the true test that you have done that is in your environs. Traditional enemies forget their hostility. We have many accounts corroborated even today in India, where in the hermitages of saints and seers, of holy men who have eschewed violence from their lives, a tiger cub and a deer, a serpent and a mongoose of traditional enmity, they forget their enmity and play or lie together. This is a fact which you can verify even today. The second requirement is truthfulness. We are asked to speak the truth, not because it is a sin to speak falsehood, not because it is a virtue, but because it is below dignity of man to speak untruth. The nature of the divine reality is truth. And if we want to realize the divine, approach the divine, we have necessarily to cultivate truth as a supreme value in our life. And to speak the truth necessarily implies that we think the truth, we feel the truth. And if you can cultivate the habit of always speaking the truth, a time arrives when whatever you speak comes true. This is one of the yogic powers that come to man when he makes it a rule to speak only the truth. This is called fulfillment of speech. Whatever such a person speaks comes true. And the third requirement is conservation of sex energy. Sex, I know, is a legitimate part of life, but there is such a thing as a balance, as a conservation for a higher purpose. And this is not a superstition. This is not an aberration, something unnatural that seekers are asked to do. There is a whole science behind it. Sex energy is one of the forms of life energy in the human body. In each human body, male or female, there is so much of sex fluids. And if we can compare it to water, we know that till the body comes of a certain age, these fluids gather force, and after a certain time is reached, nature forces it out. But if one can conserve this energy which we can compare to water, it gathers heat. The whole system gets warmed up, and the one result of this heat is not only the glow, but increase of willpower. A personal will gets more and more power of effectuation. Further on, this heat converts itself into light, and the brain gets illumined. Memory power increases phenomenally. Still further, both this heat and light convert themselves into an inner electricity, as a result of which the brain, the memory, and the willpower, enhanced to their optimum, function in a superlative manner. Still further, this electricity turns into a primal power, creative power of ether, or material creation is an exudation of the power of ether. And man gets that power, human being gets that creative power that belongs to primal ether. And the last stage is this power converts itself into a spiritual energy that ensures spiritual realization. I have been told, and I have been asked questions in many meetings, that the psychoanalysts in the West consider this to be a dangerous doctrine, and that people get imbalanced, people get mad by practicing this discipline of conservation of energy, sex energy. But this is not so. If a person is sincere and he wants to conserve, there is no problem. The problem arises only if there is a physical abstention but a mental indulgence. This insincerity, double life, creates a disequilibrium. Otherwise it does not. That is by the way. And the fourth requirement is non-appropriation of what belongs to others. That range of greed, desire to grasp things, that always lowers the consciousness and creates vibrations which are inimical to the right meditative poise. Then there is contentment. One must have the courage to accept the circumstances of life in which one is placed as the ones meant for him at that time. To be always excited, complaining, frustrated, complaining against God, this is hardly the attitude of a seeker. And it is true that for every seeker, everyone who wants to progress spiritually, the circumstances in which he is placed are always those which best conduce to his spiritual progress. It is not that we should not try to better our life situations. We can and we must. Progress is a law of life. But one shall not be always complaining, making oneself unhappy and miserable and those around. That is contentment. A certain tranquil acceptance of situations as they arise, as they face one. And next is purity. Purification, purity is not an external purity. It is a psychological purity. We have what are the darker or the negative qualities in us, as also the godlike, the brighter qualities. We have to leave aside, leave back all the animal vestiges and cultivate and grow in the direction of the blossoming of godly qualities. Next, we should know what we want in life. What is the path that leads to our objective? And for that, we need to study. We need to study the experiences and the records of those who have already trod the path, those who have something to say to us from which we can benefit. And next is ascesis. Ascesis is austerity. Austerity does not mean self-punishment, self-denial. It means amassing, a gathering of forces, one's faculties, and focusing them on the objective in view. A severe discipline, an inner discipline of always having the thing in the mind and organizing life in such a way that all the energies tend towards that. And last is humility, to recognize that the challenge is so great, the task is so huge, that our best strength is but puny. We should link ourselves with a greater force, a greater strength, and that is from God. So the last requirement is surrender to God. All these have to be organized in our life, interwoven with our texture of daily life. It takes time, but it helps. It creates the necessary background, builds the necessary climate in which one can meditate. And the first step before one can meditate is to find one's right posture. Meditation means one sits for a length of time considerable time. But our body is so accustomed that after a few minutes it starts getting restless. Nature has always struck a balance between the flow of life energy and the container, the physical body. When the body does not work, does not move, but sits in one place, there is a certain disequilibrium. And we feel like shaking our limbs, our fingers, our legs. To prevent this, to establish a new poise, each one has to find that particular posture in which alone one can sit without disturbance for a length of time. And each one has to find it for himself or herself. For some, a cross-legged position, sitting on the floor, may be ideal. For some others, sitting like that on chair may be ideal. For still some others, standing may be ideal. But to no one can sleeping be a posture. And only requirement is that one must be erect. The spine must be erect. The chest, the neck and the nose must be in a straight line. This is required because the ascending energies from below and the descending energies from above during meditation should not find any obstruction which is presented if the body is crooked or in a slanting position. The idea is that one must be able to forget one's body during the period of meditation. One finds that position, one closes the eyes, immediately one finds an avalanche of thoughts, thought movements, and there is a technique of using the breath to control the thought activity of the mind. There is an intimate relation between the life breath, the breathing, and the state of the mind. Very few of us really breathe in a correct manner. I was on a visit to the Himalayan Institute of Yoga last month in Pennsylvania, and there I was shown some statistics compiled by an American doctor which show that 3 out of 4 people breathe only half. They breathe just from here. Hardly people breathe from the navel. They don't draw a full breath. And this incomplete breathing leads to several diseases. That apart, there is an intimate connection between the breath and the state of mind, as I said. If the mind is restless, if the mind is upset, if you observe yourself, you will find that your breathing is very irregular. It is fast. When the mind is quiet, calm, the breathing is slow and fairly regular. You breathe through both the nostrils. So when the mind, there are too many thoughts, it is always recommended that you slow down the breath. When you sit in a position, you have to deepen the breath. Make the breath as slow as possible. And have about 5 or 6 deep breaths, the in breaths and the out breaths, 5 or 6 times. And the whole mind comes into a focus. And the next step is to collect the various threads of the mind, consciousness, that are spread in 1,000 directions, and bring them together and focus them. Then there is the question, on what are these mental energies, faculties to be focused? It depends upon what we want. One can focus on a form, any form of God, or one who represents God, or a sound that has power, a sound that has potency, what we call mantra, or an idea, God as love, God as peace, God as beauty, or any theme, liberation from nature, acquirement of serenity, the concept of serenity. Whichever you choose, the mind is fixed. But this fixation, called concentration, cannot last for too long a time. After an initial fixing, you have to let flow the mind, release the mind, and the mind should be allowed to dwell upon the object of meditation, maybe the form, maybe the idea, maybe the sound, continuously, one after another. This is called working out a theme or dwelling upon a theme without any distraction. Extraneous thoughts, extraneous concerns do not bother. We are entirely letting your consciousness flow like oil in a wick is the classic simile. This needs to be done as a discipline, regularly and slowly. You will find that you forget yourself and only the object remains. The knower disappears, only the known, the knowledge remains. So one is completely immersed, merged in the object of meditation. And this state of complete absorption is called trance, the final state in which one completely disappears. One is absolutely unaware of what is going on around, but is completely one with the object of meditation. So you can imagine, if you are thinking of peace, God as peace, of love, God as love, when you think of the implications of peace, the several aspects of peace, of love, the streams of love, or a sound like Om, which is called the mantra of liberation, the primal sound, the Logos, waves after waves emanate. The physical sound stops, the subtle sound takes over. Even the mind stops repeating, but the being repeats, and that repetition comes on the wave of emotion, and one is lost in that sea of vibrations. Before such stage can arrive, we'll always have this universal experience that there is obstruction of thoughts. Though we clear the decks by breathing exercise in the beginning, thoughts do come, and people complain that we normally don't have so many thoughts, but when we sit for meditation, there is an invasion of thoughts. But it is not so. Thoughts are always there in the universal atmosphere, and the thoughts are not ours. The thoughts are always floating. Thoughts of others around, thoughts of others who passed through this atmosphere yesterday, whatever we have read in newspapers, journals, books, not only we but others around us, all these are floating. And when we sit for meditation, we just get time and we cognize that these things are there. But they don't specially come at that time. And there are 2 or 3 ways in which to deal with this problem. The first one is to allow this flow of thoughts to continue, but for oneself not to participate in the thoughts. One must stand aside and watch, observe, be the witness. And at times, many times, the thoughts expose many corners in our own being which needs to be rounded. And gradually, when one does not participate in the thoughts, the rush loses its speed, and at one time it comes to a standstill. There are no more thoughts. The second way, a more laborious way, more strenuous way, is to treat each thought as it comes as an outsider and block its way one by one till a vacant mind is created. And the third way, which perhaps you will find more practicable, is to ignore the thoughts. Thoughts may come. Let them come on the surface of the mind. After all, interest is the basis of concentration. If I am that interested in what I want, my mind, the bulk of my mind, is always attending to what I want. A surface part of the mind, the surface layer, deals with the thoughts. Just as when you and I are engaged in this transaction of myself speaking and you listening, we do hear some noise outside, the noise of a generator, the noise of some people passing, but it does not interfere with our transaction. We take cognizance in a way, but it does not disturb. So we have to create this attitude, this poise of letting the surface mind, mechanical mind, deal with the thoughts, but the bulk of ourselves, the main part of the mind, attentive to the object of meditation. This leads in time to what is called bifurcation of consciousness, by which the surface and the mechanical part of our consciousness goes on dealing with day-to-day things, events as they come. But the main part is held aloof, above nature, above the movement of nature, observing, witnessing, sanctioning, refusing to sanction, and that creates a movement of self-liberation. So when we speak of living daily life, meditation helps us to create a habit of dealing with mechanical things in a mechanical way from the surface, but always having a deeper part, aloof, above the movement of nature. And what is important regarding such exercise of meditation is to prolong the spirit of meditation, to continue the attitude of meditation during non-meditational hours. It will not do to be quiet, benevolent, kind, simple, only during meditational hours in the prayer room, and become one's own old self when one comes out. What one feels, the attitude, that opening to higher things that one has during meditation, that spirit has to be prolonged as long as possible in working hours of the day. Then alone the texture of our life changes, the quality of our life is heightened and deepened, and a change comes over in our day-to-day life. So meditation begins as an exercise, begins as a discipline, but gradually builds itself into a force to acquire serenity, peace, objectivity, freedom from nature, and always keeping something in us open to the grace, to what flows from above, or to what gushes from inside. In each one of us there is a part where one can contact the divine presence. That's the fount of love, fount of unity. We are lost on the surface. Meditation is a way to withdraw from the surface at that time, from preoccupation with external things, and develop an in-look instead of an outlook, so that one interiorizes one's consciousness by and by, and a door is opened, a passage is created for this surge of inner peace, inner serenity, inner love and joy to reach the surface part of ourselves. Meditation at its best is a key that opens the door to the inner worlds and to the higher worlds. I have done, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer. What exercise of meditation, prayer, communion with God, they have an effect of pacifying the sex urge, purifying the sex impulse, and merging sex energy with love. In normal lives, sex is often confused for love. But during meditation and such exercises, one understands the distinction, purifies sex of its gross character, and harnesses that energy to the growth of the soul. It enhances the power of sex energy, adds a dimension of purity. Yeah.
In the Western tradition, I have been aware of this among the monastic orders, of the desire to kill out the sex impulse. And in the Eastern Orthodox tradition of Christianity, the male and the female are reconciled and harmonized. Am I right on that?
It is true that in the ascetic traditions, sex is sought to be repressed, suppressed, and eventually killed. But that's not the spiritual way. Spiritual way is first to control sex, and then at a higher stage of consciousness development to reject sex. Sex is willingly set aside, not suppressed. To suppress it always, it creates a danger. But to reject it willingly, when one has that joy, that bliss that one gets with communion with God, communion with that self, oneself, all the human joys and pleasures pale into insignificance. And a time comes when one does not bother about sex. Sex just falls away like a ripe fruit. Till then, it depends upon each individual what part sex is to play in his life. In the Indian tradition, there is what is called the householder stage, where a person has a family, marries, raises children. It is considered a part of spiritual life, because it is considered that it is not an end in itself, but it is a stage where one pays one's debt to society, debt to the family, debt to humanity, and a person moves forward. So there is nothing sinful with sex. It is an ascetic misunderstanding that sex is sinful. Sex is a legitimate part of life. Yes?
You comment on the Stoic attitude or ideas on sex. The idea that we should love God and desire Him, and at the same time it's difficult to justify the tragedies and the terrible sufferings of the world. How does one go about
Yes.
reconciling one with the other?
Right. The whole difficulty about evil, pain, suffering in this world, and reconciling it with our conception of God as all love, all grace. It can be put back. That difficulty arises from the old Judaic conception of God as somebody sitting there with the scales of justice, awarding, giving rewards for virtue, punishing for sins, and let people suffer, inflicting suffering. These are all childish imaginations, anthropomorphic, but they don't answer to the truth of life, to the truth of creation. God does not punish. It is man who punishes himself. Suffering is there because of ignorance. I am ignorant and I suffer. I don't know when I am a child that fire burns. I put my finger and I burn myself. Now, most of our sufferings are a result of our state of ignorance. the state in which we are divided from God, from nature, from others. And the center of that division is ego and desire. That is why there is so much of trouble. In his epic Savitri, my teacher Sri Aurobindo, to which reference was made, he has a passage in the Book of Fate in which he says, pain is the hammer of gods to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart. That is, without suffering, without pain, man would not progress. He will stay content with the state of whatever he has got. But the gods, the powers, cosmic universal powers, they use that suffering, pain, to egg man further, to find out why he is suffering, why there is trouble, why there is pain. And he takes steps to remedy the situations, and he progresses. Pain is the signature of ignorance. So, the more we outgrow ignorance, the more ignorance recedes and knowledge takes its place, the less will be suffering, the less is the pain. God is the fount of grace, and His grace is abundant, His love is profuse, it helps us to endure. It helps if we pray to get over our own difficulties. God is a helper, not a justicer. And suffering, to get out of suffering, is in our hands. Just as knowledge in the medical field has succeeded in eliminating a good deal of pain, physical pain, similarly, progress in the science of life, science of the mind, the science of the soul, is enabling us to leave behind a good deal of suffering. There is, of course, a distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is physical pain, suffering is psychological. And the more the mind learns to sift things, discriminate, and refuses to be driven by self-desire, self-centered ego, the less will be the suffering. We have to break out of our ego wars, universalize ourselves, cosmicize ourselves, and you will see in that process suffering is no more.
When one is trying to meditate and distraction of beautiful pictures come about, isn't that really a distraction for you?
Beautiful pictures, diagrams, lights, visions, they come. But one has to observe them. There is a meaning in why they are coming. But they are not permanent. One has to objectively observe without trying to judge them or interfere with them mentally. It shows only an opening of the subtle vision which is behind our physical vision. Some people may hear subtle sounds. The subtle hearing opens. But these are steps on the way, fingerprints of some subtle working going on in one's own being. They need not be considered as distractions. law of progress. We are in the midst of a general evolution of consciousness. The meaning of life is a progressive growth of consciousness, and this consciousness is a universal consciousness, and in each person it is an individual consciousness. It grows millenniums, for millenniums it has been growing, and it has arrived at a stage in man when evolution becomes self-aware, self-directed. Till man arrives, evolution is under the drive of nature. A stone, a plant, an animal, they don't grow consciously. But with man, the situation is different. Man has it in his power to grow, to progress, to evolve rapidly or slowly. And ego is the central point developed by nature in each form to centrate, to focus the various energies that flow into that form. That is why man says I organize everything that happens with reference to this point called I. Now, as long as I stick to that I, which is a surface central point, I do not move further. If I see the ego for what it is a shadow of the true self, the true divine center in myself. That ego drops and the true center begins to function, and I evolve from the mental consciousness to the soul or the spiritual consciousness. There is a progressive growth from this consciousness in the stone, what is called material consciousness, to consciousness in plants, what is called the life consciousness, which comes to its higher stages in the animals, and with the arrival of man it turns into mental consciousness. And now man is on the stage when he has to leap into a higher stage where it is the spiritual consciousness, a divine consciousness. Surely you must have heard of Teilhard Chardin, that French Jesuit, who speaks how this whole earth is a field of the evolution of a divine consciousness, which first organizes itself in the kingdom of mineral and stone, lithosphere, in the kingdom of the plant and in the animal, the biosphere, in the kingdom of man as the noosphere. And he says, now things are come to a stage in which the whole humanity is slowly becoming one, and man is going to exceed and become something more than man. What Aurobindo says, the mental man is going to become the Gnostic man, this divine man, where a new faculty is going to be added, truth consciousness, truth mind, instead of our intellectual mind. And we are all involved in this progressive movement of consciousness, which is essentially divine.
I go back, please, to when you were saying that if we did not have pain in life, then we would be constant, or worse to that effect. Is that to say that pain is necessary to advance?
From the larger point of view, pain, difficulties, problems They are all incentives to progress. It's true.
But it is necessary.
As long as ignorance is there. Once ignorance is not there, pain will not be there. There will be no such problems which bring suffering and pain.
I was just wondering about the karma and reincarnation and their effects on the individual's present life.
Yes. As I said, the central truth of life is evolution. Evolution of the soul. Evolution of consciousness, and that consciousness is centered, concentrated in each human being as the soul, which does not die. The body may die, it has to die, physical body, at present it has to die, but the soul survives, and it carries in itself the essence of all the karma. Karma is the reactions of the actions that it has done, the man has done in the course of the present life. It carries with it, and the consequences of what has taken place this time are added to the long list of consequences that have heaped up in the previous lives. And in each life, a particular segment of the accumulated karma is worked out. So, a good deal of what I am today and what I do today is influenced by what I did earlier. But this is also true that I also have an area of freedom, an area of self-effort by which I can cancel, I can modify a good deal of my past karma. And to that extent, man is the builder of his fate. What I reap today is the result of my own karma. But even there, up to a large extent, I can overcome that fate. Fate is not the master. Man, the soul, can accept fate, the soul can refuse. That's what Sri Aurobindo says in the same epic. There is an area of freedom, there is an area of determinism, and that determinism is my own choice. So once we accept the truth of evolution, reincarnation becomes indispensable, because you can't evolve up to the God state in one life. And karma is the machinery of this working through birth after birth. But karma is not, what you say, binding at all stages. There is one part, what is called an ineluctable karma. Some portion of the karma one has to go through. One can't get over it either by prayer or by the descent of grace or by any miracle. But except that small part, most of the karma can be overcome, modified, cancelled. Can you repeat? Is there? Oh, yes. Evolution means, by the very definition of it, bringing out more and more what is involved. There is a divinity, a divine consciousness that is embedded in matter. It is because of that seed of divinity that the whole universe has evolved and is moving towards perfection in God. So every step of evolution brings something new, what was not there yesterday. But it is not completely new in the sense that something new has been created, it has been brought out. What is involved is evolving. Movement. Yes, yes, yes. There is a change and there is a continuous movement.
Is everything that is evolving there to start with?
Everything is evolving, but at its slow rate. But we can precipitate the evolution, speed the evolution, and achieve in one life what nature would take, say, 1,000 years or 10,000 years. That's the purpose of spiritual disciplines or yoga. There is a continuous change and a continuous movement. But it is not rapid enough for me to complete my mission in one life.
But there is what is known as the straight upward path, as opposed to the
Yes,
spiral.
yes. That is, they say, the path of falsehood, the path of untruth is deviating, devious. But the path of truth is straight. So all spiritual disciplines are there to teach man to walk straight and give up his meandering course. Yes.
With all this energy, we're evolving up the scale from mineral to
Mhm.
plant to animal. What's filling this big void at the bottom? Where is this energy coming at the bottom of the scale from?
It is the spirit, the divine consciousness that has involved itself for evolution, for manifestation. And all material energy is at its roots spiritual force. It is the spiritual energy that is taking these forms. Matter is not the final end.
And as we progress and go up into a higher and higher spiritual level, do we then do the opposite, go back to the mineral?
No.
Fill that bottom?
Actually, what is happening is, as we progress, evolve, as we manifest more and more of spiritual consciousness, our body, our matter, physical matter, gets divinized. It acquires spiritual character. The body will not decay, the body will not disintegrate. Matter gets divinized. That is what Shraddha means when he says that the earth will find its deliverance in Christosphere, in the body of Christ. It is a symbolic language. In a divine consciousness, everything will be seen anew, and matter will reflect the spirit. It is in his autobiography, this Shraddha says when he was a small boy, say of about 6, 7, he used to see in each stone golden particles. And he would wonder, what is this? Is that God? Perhaps it is God. So when he went to ask his people, they said it is a blasphemy, and they shut him down. So some people do have that perception that God consciousness is there embedded in a stone and a mineral. As you evolve, it will manifest. Nothing will be rejected. Everything will be taken up in the Spirit of God. And the body will reveal itself as truly a tabernacle of God. Yes?
That's why then they talk about the higher consciousness people reincarnate so much slower say it takes 100 years before you come back sometimes, the higher you evolve spiritually. It's almost like they wait for the physical grace to evolve.
The fact is, when you are less evolved, when your consciousness is still low, after death you can't go beyond a certain state. You come back. But the more you are evolved, the more you are spiritually developed, the higher you go to the place of peace. And you can stay and assimilate things at your own choice and take your own time. But unripe, raw souls, beings, they can't go and they come back soon. Yes?
This is still a question of ego, unfortunately. Isn't spiritual evolution just another type of involvement in the fun?
It's a very good question. As you forge karma only when you act from your ego level. When the ego is not there, when your will is in tune with the divine will, when you are absolutely surrendered and you act only on the divine will, impulse impelling you, whatever you do not forge any karma. A liberated man does not create karma, and he has no karma. So the more you evolve, the less karma you forge. No, a liberated man, he is highly evolved. Yes, he is evolving in a spiritual dimension. He is above nature. He is one with divine consciousness. There is a high degree of evolution. The fact that he continues to work for the benefit of humanity does not make him less evolved. He does not forge karma. He helps others to shake off their karma. Yes.
I think what he's trying to get at is what is found in the Bhagavad Gita. This idea of not being attached to the result of one's work.
Yes.
If you're attached to the result, you form karma. Is that correct?
Yes. The Gita teaches man how to convert actions which are normally the means of karma into becoming means of liberation. When you don't act on an egoistic basis, but offer every activity to God as your labor of love, and your sense of doer completely disappears, and you are only an instrument of a divine energy that flows through you. You do not forge karma. That's the doctrine of works enunciated in the Gita. That a spiritual man continues to work in the world. He will not shirk from duty. He will not run away from the world, being afraid of karma. He will work, but in a different context.
Why are we going how does it start? Does a stone have karma and then that's what makes it go up to flat life? When do we get the karma?
This is an old conundrum in philosophy. You know, who did that, who did that? Reductio ad absurdum, you go there. But karma starts at the human level. not before. And Buddha, who has given the most rational explanation of karma, he says the first karma starts with desire. Desire. Desire, I want this thing, I want that thing. That I fulfill one desire, it creates 10 more desires. So it is a chain, he says. So he says the way to cut your karma is to cut at the roots of desire. And then automatically it will come to a standstill. But that's another philosophy. But desire is at the root of karma. I think we should stop. Thank you. Thank you.